So I wanted to show you a little shortcut for calculating mean and standard deviation of a discrete probability distribution using the calculator. I haven't actually always done this. I used to just do these by hand, and as you maybe have experienced, that the calculation can be a little bit tricky. Not tricky, but just cumbersome to do. It takes a little while to do when we do that by hand. So actually a student showed me that he found how to do this in the calculator, and I wanted to share that with you. So that's what we'll do. So I've got an example of a discrete probability distribution. This was our first easy example with rolling a die with values 1 through 6. A fair die, so all the probabilities were 1/6. And we had formulas to calculate the mean and standard deviation, but again, the calculator can make our lives a little bit easier with those calculations. So here's what we'll do. We're going to take advantage of stat calc, one-bar stats option, which we've used to calculate means and standard deviations before, but just for a set of sample data, not for this probability distribution idea. So that's the new part. So we'll go into our edit menu to enter the data first. So just under stat, hit enter on edit, and we'll enter the values. Clear out your list if you need to, and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 for our x values, the values that we can roll on a die. And then it was 1/6 for each probability. 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, 1/6, and one more. Okay, this is again kind of just a simple example to get us going, but it'll see how this calculation works. And then we'll go to stat, over to calc, and then the one-bar stats option there that we've used before. Now before we just gave it one list, or just hit enter and it would use L1. So I want to tell it to use L1 to calculate the average and standard deviation of those x values, but I want to do it with the weights of those probabilities. Those probabilities make some count more, some count less sometimes. Here they all count equally. So actually I think if we hit enter there, since this one all counts them equally, we would get that same mean and standard deviation. But what we want to do is tell it what those weights are. So we give it the second list. You hit a comma, which is right above the 7 on the calculator, and then second 2 for list 2. So it's your x values in list 1 and your probabilities of each of those x values in list 2, just like we entered them. And then you hit enter on that, and we get our mean. Now it's using a different symbol than we've been using. We've been using mu for those means of probability distributions, but it's using x bar. This isn't really a sample mean because we're not really seeing what the average roll of a bunch of rolls of a die are. We're seeing what the average roll of all rolls of a die would be, but that's our interpretation of it. So 3.5 was the same mean that we calculated, and then the standard deviation that we calculated, 1.7 with some extra decimal places if we want, is there as well. If we wanted the variance, we could find that. So you could do you could do the standard deviation squared to find the variance if it asks for that. 1.707825, however many decimal places we want for precision, squared. This would be our variance, 2.9167 that we found by hand as well. So it was before we took the square root to get to the standard deviation. So the calculator will give you that standard deviation, and you can square it if you need to find the variance. But it's just kind of taking advantage of that one-bar stats command with an extra comma and then giving it the probabilities in a second list to calculate that. So we'll try that one more time with another example. This will go quicker now that we know how to do it. So I'll use this example that we had, kind of the third example of mean and standard deviation of a probability distribution. We were given 1, 2, 3, and 7 as the possible values of a random variable, so that changed things a little bit. And those probabilities as weights of each of those values, 0.31, 0.33, 0.25, and 0.11. So we'll enter those in the calculator. Oops, move over here. Sorry, change that a bit. 1, 2, 3 are fine, and then we had 7. And let me delete the others. Delete, delete. There's 4 of them. And I'm going to hit clear on our entire list just to clear out all those probabilities at once. You could hit delete on the individual values if you wanted to. And we got 0.31, 0.33, 0.25, and 0.11. And then again we'll go to stat, over to calc, one-bar stats, and then it's second 1 for list 1 where the x values are, comma above the 7 again, second 2 for list 2 where the probabilities are, and it'll calculate our mean and standard deviation with that probability distribution, with those probabilities attached. Alright, and there's our mean, 2.49, same as we calculated by hand, and our standard deviation, 1.752, there it is, rounded to 1.8 if we want. Again, if we wanted the variance, we could square that value and find the variance. So that's how it works. Again, it's entering your data in stat edit, and then stat calc, one-bar stats with the list name where the x's are, and then comma, the list name where the probabilities are. So usually that's L1, comma, L2, and then you hit enter and it gives you the mean and standard deviation, along with other things.